Hi, everybody. Welcome to Meet the Mother of Damn, a webcast chat with Jennifer Newman. My name is David Diamond. I direct global marketing for Picturepark. I've been in the industry more than 15 years, authored Damn Survival Guide, and won the 2013 Dammy of the Year Award. With me today, Jennifer Newman, who's the founder and director of The Final Candidate. She is an advisory board member for Axel Media Asset Management and also an advisory board member for Stuttgart IT. And she is the founder and former CEO of Kanto Software. Welcome, Jennifer.
Well, welcome to you, David, and thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. So you are just so that everybody knows exactly where you are calling from your home in Barcelona today. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. And how's the weather out there in Spain?
Well, I think California always has good weather too, so there's nothing to envy. But we do enjoy a lot of sunshine down here.
Okay, great. Well, it's actually pretty nice here in Southern California, or excuse me, in Northern California, in San Francisco area right now too. So we both lucked out. Our agenda for today: the early years of digital asset management, life after DAM for Jennifer, what comes next, and looking back. You can see the control panel to the right of the screen here. If you've got questions for Jennifer, go ahead and type them in at any point during the broadcast, and at the end of the session, we'll reserve some time to go through those questions. Okay, let's get started. Jennifer, why DAM? You could have done anything with your talents as a developer, and you decide that you're going to go in the direction of digital asset management. What were you thinking?
Well, actually, the decision to do and produce a DAM product, that was not the major one that put me in that direction. We had started the company 3 years earlier. The first product we did was a scanning software product, and it sold like sliced bread in Germany because all the scanners didn't have proper software coming with it. I guess we sold something like 10,000 copies of it.
Wow.
And guess what? I mean, after all these people had now scanned images, they needed something to organize them. So they came back and said, well, you got us now all this mess with the images. Can you do something about it? Can you add a feature? And I think one of the clever decisions that I made in my career as a CEO was that I said, no, this is not a feature. We have to have a separate product for this. And that became Cumulus, which was the first client-server digital asset management product on the market.
And do you remember if this was back in what, like 1990? Is that around the right time that this happened?
Well, Kanto was founded in 1990. The Cumulus product came in late 92, I think. Right.
And I remember back in those days when you mentioned the scanners. For those of us who are old enough to remember, we remember getting these scanners and then having to worry about, do you have software to make this work on your machine? And it was usually the Mac software that was unavailable with the scanner. And this was the void that you were filling originally?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And we had a great time because, as I said, all the scanner manufacturers worked with us. We had basically even color copiers, early color copiers from Canon being shipped to us in our office in Berlin. So it was quite some technology ride. You know, be in touch with all the leading manufacturers around the world.
Right, and I guess in addition, building up connections with what would become your primary client base when you switched to the Cumulus product, which is pretty clever.
Absolutely.
Okay, so has digital asset management become what you expected when you first got into this?
I have to be very honest at this point. We were in for a drive. Not only did we have the support of all these vendors on the scanning side, but because we were first to market, we had a huge amount of demand from people, not just Germany, but soon after we opened an office in America in San Francisco. And so I was invited to all kinds of publishers, New York Times, Time Magazine, and that basically somewhat built the Cumulus product over time as we were trying to desperately keep up with the somewhat different demand you would get from the different kinds of companies that you're dealing with.
Right. And so, I mean, but did you, I mean, when you look at it today, when you're looking at it now, what, over 20 years since the first product shipped, is this what you expected?
To be honest, it came short of my expectations.
And tell us about that.
Well, I really think that there was an opportunity, there's still probably an opportunity to have them have much more impact. It certainly has a quite reasonable or decent success in the market. I mean, just we at Kanto sold over 11,000 to business customers, client service solutions. And there's other companies out there that also sold at least hundreds to really large companies. So there is certainly business and it's going. But maybe to put into perspective of what I think DAM should have done is to, rather than becoming what I now perceive is a middleware solution, you know, middleware meaning it's like not the front end that the customer realizes that that's what drives his business, but it's just the server in the middle there, or even in the back.
Right.
And so I would have wished that the whole DAM solutions would have taken much more prominent positioning, and that way also get much more of the lion's share of the revenue. The best example I can come up with is, by the way, when you look at the success of the marketing companies, and marketing, as you know, is one of, or from the beginning, was one of the top verticals to sell to. Then when you look at take a Primo, maybe not everybody knows a Prima. They were one of the early marketing operation management company. Mm-hmm. And within 10 years, they basically grew to a company that was then acquired by TerraTech about 4 years ago, I think, for $550 million.
Right.
And the same thing happened afterwards just a few years ago with Marketo, another Silicon Valley-based company, same vertical marketing, and they just went IPO. After 5 years, they had already raised $170 million. So these guys, these companies have been able to position themselves much more directly with the customer and on the revenue-generating side, and very visibly, you can generate much more business and profitability if you're in that front-end position rather than in the middleware position.
Well, I mean, it's what you brought up is a great point. So we've got the marketing automation segment, which is what you mentioned, Marketo. Eloqua has also gone public in there. We've had other acquisitions, Marketing Pilot getting acquired by
yep.
Microsoft. It seems that as soon as you put the word marketing on your product, people resonate with this. So is it, with digital asset management, should we have called it marketing asset management? What was there something that we did that just fundamentally disconnected the product from the audience? Because it's hard to believe that people need marketing software without digital asset management software.
Yeah, well, I don't want to blame anyone in particular for creating this acronym called DAM that I don't think many people like. I mean, neutrally looked at, it's not much of a problem, but you know how humans communicate. If I tell to a customer, I have a solution for your marketing department, they understand what it's for. If I tell them I have a DAM solution, well, all I get back is a blank stare, or if I'm lucky, I get a question like, well, I have some minutes for you to explain to me what this is going to do for me.
Right, and when you first shipped Cumulus, tell everybody what you called it.
Sorry, I missed the end of the sentence.
When you
shipped Cumulus?
Yeah, you didn't use the term digital asset management back then. What was the term you used?
No, I mean, the start was absolutely pragmatic. We called it an image database because all we were managing in the beginning was images. Then, of course, soon after, we got the request to organize and structure compound documents like Quark Express documents or InDesign documents. Then, right. So image database certainly was no longer the proper word for it, but the president that I hired in San Francisco, a really good guy, Steve Goodman, he actually suggested that we call it media asset management, which now is somewhat perceived as a subsector of digital asset management, at least if you believe Wikipedia. And I think media asset management is the much better term, and I think the companies that do video management, for instance, live happily with that acronym versus DAM.
Right. Do you think, is it too late for the digital asset management industry to reinvent itself under a moniker that might better connect? What do you think?
It is never too late. Of course, there's still a lot of opportunity. I mean, just go back to the example I made. Prima already skimmed off half a billion dollars, you know, in money, and then comes Marketo and Eloqua and whatever. So, of course, the opportunities are still there. But I think there's a lot to be corrected with the positioning, and it's not about just a single vendor. I think the vendor community should have been much better to work together to create an image of the market that helps the whole group more.
And what would you, if you had some advice for damn vendors on how to get our acts together, what would you say?
There's not a single thing to say or do, but there are symptoms where you can recognize that other vendors in slightly different positioned markets are doing better. Take, for instance, the document management market. You know, I mean, these guys are, and then of course you have the typical big companies. Just pick Microsoft again with their SharePoint product. So they work with all the other people like Alfresco, and they come up with a standard called Oasis CMIS, and that way they clearly define how the interoperability works, and that potentially reduces the effort the system integrators have to put in. All this kind of cooperation and work that, you know, even for these big guys is not very easy to do, because first and foremost they want to compete and not cooperate, but they understand that that is important to really build a market and, you know, protect yourself from new incoming competition.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Tell us about Kanto. You built this company from scratch, and certainly at the time it was one of the strongest brands in the field, and you were basically responsible for this. And then something went wrong. What went wrong? Tell us what led to this and what happened.
Well, there's always something that goes wrong. Basically, by the way, Kanto, I think, is still doing. I don't know too much about them, but there is a lot of stuff. As I said, the installed base was very significant, and that is something you can live on for quite some time. But what I also built was a very strong system integrator and reseller network, and I think that is certainly also something that keeps Kanto in the business. What happened, I mean, I wouldn't say wrong in the sense of Kanto had something wrong. What happened with me leaving the company was simply that there were different people having different opinion on where the company should go. And basically, you heard my opinion just in previous sentences about positioning the company and positioning the company around front-end solutions. So I had at the time, for instance, struck a deal with Quark to build such front-end solution where we would have a controlled environment with basically all technology being provided between Quark and Kanto, and it involved also a workflow solution. But there were other directors and people with opinion in my company in Kanto that didn't believe that was the right way, so there was ultimately no other choice for me but to leave.
Yeah, I mean, just to put this into perspective for people, I know I haven't just just for full disclosure, Jennifer brought me into the digital asset management industry. So she is the reason that I'm involved with digital asset management. And the time that she's talking about back in these days, I remember the first time I heard the word workflow and thinking, I don't even know what that is. But Jennifer was off trying to automate this for people, and I was still trying to get a grasp of what does she mean by workflow management? Nobody was talking about this at that point in time, and there just wasn't there wasn't a real buy-in for that inside the company. And of course, now we fast forward a decade or more, and workflow is obviously extremely important, and people completely understand it. So you were way ahead of your time on that one as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say way ahead, but I feel proud that basically, you know, it was quite funny that other vendors then immediately picked up on it. So I think I could mention Adam that immediately at that time put in a partnership with a workflow vendor. So other people saw the need that I saw too, to build such end-to-end solutions. And even there's a company called Moksha that lives as a system integrator of Kanto. They've built now also, just as a small company, approvals workflows. So they're telling me they're doing well too. So I think it's by now very well understood that workflows can be a very central and valuable part of a solution.
Okay. So after Kanto, you went off on your own, and before we'll get into talking about exactly what you did, but how did your perspectives on digital asset management and life change after this? I mean, this was your baby, and now your baby is being managed by somebody else. What did you think of the industry, and what did you think of just everything that was going on?
Well, I mean, first of all, having been with the company for 16 years, it is quite a change. But then I knew where I was going, so I immediately turned to SharePoint because Microsoft had just released a new version of SharePoint. That was SharePoint 2007, which included a workflow engine. So I also, while starting over is not that easy, it's again doing all the bootleg work and groundwork.
Right.
I had to go back into technology, and it's not that that was a challenge, but after 15 years or 13 years of doing mostly sales and marketing and running the company, it was quite an adventure for me to go back into technology, and that is something that I've always enjoyed. At my heart, I basically am a product person. I love to be productive and create things, so the learning and producing side was reinvigorated, and I'm still enjoying that a lot, and that's now, what is it, I left in 2006, so we're talking 7 years later. I'm very happy with the directions that I've taken since then.
So when you leave, so you were selling commercial digital asset management software, and then all of a sudden you're not, and you still have all of the knowledge that you had while you were building that, and now you're free to do anything you want with that information, or free to interpret it any way you want. Did your views on DAM change at all? Did you think that like you said, you had an interest in SharePoint? Was this to the exclusion of DAM, or did you see a partnership there, or what was your feeling on that?
Well, I actually, what attracted me most with SharePoint was that it existed in two forms. There was a commercial version of SharePoint that included everything, all the features, and even back then came with quite a price point. And that was a very encompassing system even back then in 2007. But what interested me much more was that the SharePoint Foundation version, which was a free product, looked like a perfect platform to just build solutions on. So the SharePoint Foundation back then already had version control, it had workflow in it, it had document libraries in there, it could extract metadata from all the Office files. So I thought, that would be a great platform to build on, and put solutions together with very attractive price points. Well, of course, I found out that not everything is gold on either side. So some of this actually was successful, and then others I found out were things that were broken in SharePoint, and then you basically start the move to just wait for the next version of SharePoint and see what gets better.
Okay, so the company that you founded after Kanto was the final candidate. So what was your vision and your inspiration for doing this? What did Final Candidate aim to do?
Well, the thing is that I should mention is that I didn't start the Final Candidate by myself. There were a couple of people that left Kanto with me. I should mention especially my co-founders that run the Final Candidate in Germany, Jens Thomas Hörner and Roland Berg. And so we basically, we were typical founders, and discussed different directions we should take, and different businesses we should go after. And we still work very closely together, even though we cover quite some ground. To be particular, or to be specific, the guys in Berlin still do a lot of system integration work with various DAM vendor products, but we also do some product development work, and we do even entirely different work apart from digital asset management.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Jens and Roland these were high-profile people at Kanto. Do you feel like, did they leave Kanto to follow you because they wanted to share your vision of SharePoint, or was this that they shared the same frustration that you had shared or felt?
Yeah, that was exactly the point. They basically him, especially Jens being the lead technical guy from Kanto. He not only believed in what I did, he was part of it.
Right.
You know, actually, the workflow effort was started in the Dubai office, and we had Jens involved from the beginning. And Roland was the sales director, and so he basically shared that vision too.
Okay. So, what role does SharePoint play now? Now, and the way that I'm positioning this question because I know in our pre-interview, and you just touched on it a little while ago, that it sounds like you had a different opinion of SharePoint when you got started than you have now. How has your opinion changed, and what do you think? Where does SharePoint fit in with this whole digital asset management landscape?
Yeah, well, there have been two versions since then. SharePoint 2010 came out in 2009, and then 2013 came out at the beginning of this year. There's two sides to the coin here, as always. The system certainly has gotten better in different ways. I mean, one needs to keep in mind that SharePoint first came out in 2001 and was actually acquired from another smaller company. And so there's a lot of heritage, and not so good one, in the code, and that had to be straightened out. Some was done with the 2010 version. 2013 is built more towards marketing demand, meaning marketing positioning in terms of what the whole solution should offer. 2010, I think, was really, in a general way, a step forward. Opened a lot of doors, made the whole SharePoint environment more structured so that you could add your own services, for instance. Your whole application could become a service in SharePoint, is what I'm trying to say. With 2013, I have mixed feelings. The system has gotten too big by now. You can see that with the fact that not just the full-fledged version, but even the, they don't call it foundation anymore, but the free version at the bottom takes enormous resources. You basically have to put lots of gigabytes on just the web service, and to install it, you have to run a very long list of shell script commands that I would say takes about an hour and a half just to install the thing in an automated fashion. We're not talking about manually clicking things. That will take you a day.
Right, right. So you hear whereas it seems like 12 months ago, SharePoint could do no wrong. Everybody talked about SharePoint. Everybody was moving to SharePoint. Everybody wanted, and now the buzz seems to be the phrase SharePoint is dead. So why do people all of a sudden feel that there's now a big red flag hanging over SharePoint? Is it for the reasons that you just cited?
Well, because in a way, Microsoft has alienated a large part of the SharePoint developers because in an effort, this is my educated guess, in an effort to reduce the tech support problems that they had from custom solutions being installed on SharePoint. Right. They now, with SharePoint 2013, have gone to a model where there's apps, everything these days, ever since Apple introduced apps, everyone seems to be in the need to create just another app model. So here goes an app model for SharePoint. Right. But what it means is that you have now something that with SharePoint that is isolated. You cannot customize it, especially the hosted version that SharePoint or that Microsoft promotes now. And you have to have your code run on a separate server, preferably if it was Microsoft choice on Azure, of course. And you're looking at, by default, HTML, JavaScript apps. And there's nothing wrong with HTML5 and JavaScript, but when you then have to work through, going onto Azure and then putting code back into SharePoint. I don't want to get too technical here, but it makes it very complicated by definition. But considering that all the development customization work before was done by C# developers, I go back to my word alienating. That alienates developers because now all of them have to learn JavaScript, which is not something that you just learn in a week.
So do you think that are damn SharePoint and CMS on a collision course? I mean, are these things all merging into the point where they're offering one another's technology to the point where we're not going to even be able to differentiate between them in a few years?
But how exactly do you find content management system, document management system, or?
Well, just in the most broad scope of content management, whether it's web content management or document management, do you think that there's that we will continue to maintain some parallelism between all of these things, or or one becomes a feature of the other?
Well, I mean, one thing I think is a given is Microsoft is one of the big companies, and SharePoint not only has generated more than $1 billion in the last couple of years for Microsoft, and has a very vast installed base, and so especially installations that were put in at quite some cost don't get easily uninstalled. So what you should be looking at is SharePoint to exist with us for a number of years to come. At the same time, unless they do change something with the next major version again, but if they continue on the path they're on, then there's a likely chance that it will become the next version of Lotus, which also somewhat still lives there somewhere, but is less relevant. But what I think, regardless of what can be still done, or in the future might even be new to be done with SharePoint, it is one of the dominant solutions out there, and digital asset management solutions have to have a story how to integrate with it. And that opens another Pandora's box, because there's, so far as I've seen from various vendors, some level of integration, just to make the assets visible in SharePoint.
Right.
But that's usually done through a minimalistic way, like having a part in SharePoint, and does not utilize to start with all the options that you now have with federated search in SharePoint.
Right.
But to bring up another topic here, which is the whole metadata side of it, there is no clear definition on how the metadata between a DAM system and the metadata that now is in SharePoint is synchronized.
Right. So what advice can you offer to organizations who are considering DAM or SharePoint? How do they decide which direction to go, and how do they decide if they should go either direction at all?
Yeah, I actually think that question does not present itself very frequently, even though it's not unlikely. I actually, personally, with friends of mine who ran until recently, when they sold a company called Gravis, the leading Mac retail company in Germany, they asked me, because they put a new e-commerce solution in, and that one didn't have much management capability for images. And so he approached me with the typical question, Jennifer, can't you just help us with putting in something to manage the images? So there was a very limited scope, only images, but it was more, we're back to workflow here, about how do we make sure the marketing department has an easy way to ingest these images into the e-commerce site, and then whatever else existed in workflow steps. And at that moment, that was one of the decisions where I decided it would actually be better to have SharePoint Foundation be used, because it was just easier to do the integration. At the same time, I think that's a challenge also for many of the older DAM systems, which have grown by now quite complex with hundreds, if not thousands, of features. If you have such a platform like SharePoint Foundation was, you can make it virtually invisible, and I think that's always the best solution. So all I want to say is there's no such thing as a black and white situation here, but to go back, I think most of the time it is different people, different groups in the company that either consider SharePoint or DAM, so I don't think it's very often happening that people have a head-to-head decision between do we do DAM or SharePoint.
Okay. Have you, at Final Candidate, have you ever implemented systems for people that were one and then later on decided that you should migrate to the other?
Again, there's no swap that I typically see.
Okay.
There's more integration questions that people do. What I do see, of course, is there is a good number of swaps between different brands of digital asset management solutions.
Yeah. Tell us about that. How often does that happen?
Oh, it happens whenever a customer is no longer satisfied. I want to give one example. I don't want to hurt the vendors here, but so I'm not going to say the names. But there was a solution with quite a big publishing company, and the digital asset management system provided value, yes, but the customer, the publisher, needed more functionality, needed a more complete solution, and maybe to say the vendor on the positive side who took the business in the end, they then went with Woodring because they had a couple of years back acquired Elvis, which does digital asset management, and Woodring provided basically more than just digital asset management, and eliminated, that was the hope of the publishing company, eliminated the need for manual or expensive integration between the publishing side and the digital asset management side.
Right. Now, we hear it's not uncommon to find a long-time digital asset management customer who has something negative to say about his or her solution, but it is difficult for that pain to get at such a threshold that they're willing to really make a change. I've read recently there's some conversations out on various boards about, do you switch or do you just deal with what you've got and try to learn it better and make the most of it? At what point would you give somebody advice that they should be looking for a different system? Is there any particular red flag you'd look out for?
Yeah, well, I would even add a third route. It's still not unlikely, or it is still likely to some extent, that people will consider a totally custom solution. I mean, not meaning everything's written by in-house engineers, but that there's basically something that really suits the business that they're running. Because changing existing workflows in a company is always very expensive and can create all kinds of human problems. So that is important too. When it comes to making these decisions, I think there's a lot of politics involved too. So it's never really a technology decision, or that somebody with a sharp pencil just calculates out how much money will be saved or wasted either way. So I think it's a very customer by customer specific way of decision making about that.
Okay. So switching gears a bit, getting a little bit more retrospective with you, what was the best business advice that you ever got?
That is, I love this question because I have only one answer for that. And in 1995 at Drupa, Frederick Brahimi, the president of Quark, who I looked up to, they were already a very successful company, gave me great advice. And he actually said, Jennifer, can you take you outdoors for a soda? And of course I was thrilled to get some chance to talk to him. And he just point blank told me, Jennifer, you don't know your customers well enough. And I took that by heart. It's actually, to be successful, you really have to know your customers. And that means like how they operate, how they work. And how it showed, for instance, go back and initially here in this webcast, I said something about New York Times and Time Magazine. Mm-hmm. I sold Time Magazine. And then I was called in by New York Times to present, and I gave the Time Magazine as a reference because they asked for references. Mm-hmm. And they looked at me with a blank stare and said, but Jennifer, that is magazine business. We do newspaper business. Right. Yeah, so it's basically, and maybe to give another example on why this is so important, look at the Marketo video. The slogan that they have is for marketing professionals, from marketing professionals. So if you want to be successful, and this is where I have my doubts about most of the damn companies out there, do they really fully understand the vector that, the sector that they're saying they're addressing? Because all of them, they address pretty much everything. They have all the sectors, brand management, marketing, and what have you. Mm-hmm. It means, though, that you have to have really great people totally understanding that exact business, and that actually pays off. Maybe to give another small-scale example, as you mentioned, I'm an advisor on the Excel board. Sam Bogash, formerly a system integrator of Kanto and had worked with me, is now doing a product that he introduced to the market a year ago, and he did that after actually he had been now in his career 5 years as the main product manager for Avid Interplay. And so he knows everything about video, and he has created something that he calls radically simple, and that is basically the main thing that attracts people. And he invited me to join him at IBC, which is one of the major shows, especially, definitely the most important video show in Europe, in Amsterdam a month ago or so, 6 weeks ago. And I was there for 3 days, and it was fantastic to just hear him talk, because there was no bullshit at all. He had a great time, the customers had a great time, the integrators that were interested had a great time, because he talks with his heart about the business, knows everything, and it can tell you exactly what they don't do, for instance. There's something that I missed from many Denvers too, many times.
Yeah, it's interesting because taking off on what you had mentioned, where you go to different DAM vendor websites and you hear stories that are very similar. You go to solutions pages and they all have a solution for A, B, and C. And then there are some that say that they are truly differentiating, but then when you look at the product level, most DAMs are very, very much the same product, with certain exceptions there. So it's interesting to do you think that DAM vendors would be better suited, or not be better suited, would do themselves justice by really differentiating on a technology level, so that we do something specifically well for a specific vertical and focus there?
Well, I mean, I think an indicator is to go back to Moksha, my friend Vince DePaula, who has built his own workflow solution. He, quote unquote, told me that, many times he sells Cumulus as the backend that drives the solution, but he tries to not show Cumulus at all. Because it's potentially confusing with all these features and bells and whistles, and he's happy that he has a user interface provided by his workflow solution that he can absolutely fine-tune on the customer needs, and that's something that he can sell. But if you introduce something that has all these other things that look interesting but then turn out to be mildly relevant or not relevant at all, then you create more problems for the sales cycle than you're really helping.
That's very true. Okay. Do you have any regrets about your involvement in the digital asset management industry?
Absolutely not. I have to say that I feel very blessed because it's given me a global business. I mean, what else could you ask for? And I have now friends around the world, and have lived in different places, and it's been absolutely exciting and sometimes, of course, stressful too. And running a company is never easy, or if you have to lay off somebody, is terrible. But overall, I'm absolutely thrilled and happy the way everything works out for me.
Okay, I know I speak for many people when I say you absolutely do, my dear, have many friends around the world.
Thank you.
All right. Before we get into the Q&A, a little commercial moment for the sponsor, Picturepark, offering content-focused digital asset management in the cloud or installed, and free accounts are available at picturepark.com/now. And we'll move on to the Q&A session. So this is where I get clunky with moving around the control panel here, so don't mind my my stuff here. I just need to read all these questions. Oh my gosh, we've got so many questions here. Okay, the first question, excuse me, from Aman. Do you think the naming problem is about digital versus media, or more about asset versus file? That's interesting.
To start with, I think every single letter of that acronym is not helping, to say it friendly. Digital, I mean, we all live in the digital world, right? So it is not really telling anyone anything. Whenever I say the word asset, and it's not with a digital asset management guy who knows that I'm talking digital asset management language, then everybody thinks about, certificates, I mean, money, paper, I mean, anything that has outright value, a bond, yeah. And management, well, there too, everybody manages something,
Right.
As part, maybe it's a stupid example, but part of my life is to manage the kitchen. I mean, the whole thing for me is just not helping. It's a useless acronym that doesn't get anything across. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. All right. And Andrew has asked, he says, Jennifer mentioned workflow in DAM with Quark. Why do you think it has taken so long for, now another question just came in and screwed my view up. Why do you think it has taken so long for DAM and workflow to connect? Even today, many DAM systems are not workflow centric.
Yeah, I think I can only assume that the typical factors come in. I really had a clear feeling also at Kanto. I didn't resonate with everyone else in my company because there's such a thing called not invented here syndrome. Yeah. So it was to start with, I think, maybe I stepped on the toes of some people in the Berlin office by doing it in the Dubai office. This is speculation. Right. But it's also, of course, something that's difficult. I mean, to be very clear, the first version of the workflow that SharePoint has also had lots of bugs. I mean, embarrassing amount of bugs, even to the level that in 2013 now they introduced a brand new, entirely new workflow engine. Yeah, so it seems that some people have a terrible time to get these workflow solutions being finished. At the same time, when I look at my friend Vince DePaula, I mean, he too took something like 3 years to develop it with 2 people. So it's not like you would think that other people could develop that. Adam, by the way, really did a smart thing and just simply went out, took one of the existing workflow solution providers and just integrated their solution and was done with it. So it can be done easily, but well, different people have different hesitation.
Okay. Shirley asks you, did you ever talk with Apple or Microsoft about building proper DAM features into the OS? That's interesting.
That reminds me, I was at the SharePoint conference in Las Vegas in 2009. I talked to the guy that, I forgot his name by now, never seen him again, that actually presented himself as he is responsible for something like digital asset management. Never really anything major came out of it. I mean, by now, in the latest version, 2013, they even recommend that you put videos in SharePoint. I'd be thinking more than once about that one before I do that. So I really don't consider SharePoint a really great digital asset management solution, even though, of course, there is some functionality in that they can use.
Okay. And Olga asks, if you were CEO of Kanto, why couldn't you just force them to do what you wanted?
Oh, because I didn't have the majority of the shares, and that's how companies work. It's basically I had 30% of the shares, I think, if I'm correct, and so there were 70% that didn't go my way.
Okay. And let's see if I can read this. Okay, Sarah. Okay, yeah, Sarah says, I once read an analyst report that said Kanto lost its soul after you left, and I agree. Would you ever consider going back?
I have to ask going back where? To Kanto? Or?
I'm guessing that that's what she meant, yes.
Yeah, actually, I have a very personal feeling about that. For me, this is like, you know, separating from a lover and then getting back together. That would not be an option for me.
Okay, all right, that's fair. And this one comes from John. He says, if a CIO sponsors a DAM acquisition, it looks like an IT project. If the business sponsors it, there's often a lack of sufficient IT ownership. Who are the who are the proper sponsors for DAM, and how do you get them in today's business environment?
So I missed the beginning of the question. So it's IT sponsoring it versus the business side sponsoring it?
Well, no, he's saying that if IT sponsors it, it looks like an IT project, and if the business side sponsors it, there's often a lack of IT enthusiasm for it. So he's wondering where does DAM belong in an organization?
Yeah, well, I always I have a clear opinion about that one. It should definitely be the business side that needs to be in the driver's seat. What I've seen successfully is, and of course, in the end, you need the support from IT, and I've seen, of course, a lot of backlash from IT also about these things, but it doesn't always have to be. I recently was involved with a project using Scrum, which is just something very popular, not only in the development world, but also in general in companies. And I think if you act somewhat methodical, then these things can come together. But I think it is always also important to have top management on top of both IT and the business side be able to give budgets and provide directions and support to whatever project is happening.
Okay. We've got David is asking, ask Jennifer what she thinks about the one MAM DAM to rule them all versus having different products for images or other rich media, text document, and web uses. Should there be one DAM for everything, or should a company have multiple DAMs?
You mean the DAM system just manage one kind of document type, whether it's an image or whether it's video?
I think what he's talking about is that is it okay for a company to have multiple DAMs when one is good at doing function A and the other one is good at doing function B, or should they be looking for one dam that can do A and B equally well?
Okay, now I get it. Well, it certainly is always better to have less systems than more systems, because in a way you have to integrate them, and that can just be a nightmare by itself. Typically, I've seen that you have different systems, but they should really be clearly defined of what they take care of. You know, as I made my example before, if you have a DEM server and you have a SharePoint server, then you could manage lots of the documents on either or other side, and that will create a lot of confusion. It will not work in the end. But it's normally down to specific file formats that could only be managed with a certain tool that forces a separate system. Whenever possible, I would, of course, recommend to have one system instead of multiple.
Okay. And Scott wants to know what you think the hardest part about implementing DAM across a global enterprise would be.
Oh, I think there's, if it's a global enterprise, there's many things that you have to deal with. There's the people level, there's the technology level, there's the communication level between the people, and the pure technical stuff. So I really think there's nothing that stands out for me. A global project is just something very complex, and you have to have, and this is something I want to throw out as a recommendation anyway. I mean, if you're at that level, you not just need one great system integrator, you need a whole team assembled that not only has authority for the various decisions to be made, but also have the expertise for everything involved. And yeah, so assembling the right team was probably the most important to make a global project successful.
Okay. And Chuck asks, this is actually a topic I've heard before, does it make sense to keep a database organized in a folder hierarchy by subject matter so that the database can be moved easily from one vendor to another as the DAM sauce providers become more competitive? And his second part is, should customers be more willing to move DAM, or I guess move across DAMs?
Hang on, I just lost you for 1 second.
Okay, so the first part of his question sounds like he's saying, should we keep things organized in a simple folder structure in our DAMs to make it easier to move to another system if we decide to move to another system? And the second part is that should customers be willing to move to other systems?
Well, it really depends to start with on the system, and there's two things, right? There's always the assets that have to be moved, and with some systems like SharePoint, by the way, they live in the database, versus most DAM systems have opted, I think, to have the assets just live in the file system somewhere. And then the metadata is a separate story from that. But I have to say that any kind of migration usually or the success of any migration depends largely on the functionality to extract the data from one side and then import it on the other side. So it's very specific about the two systems, the one from and the one to, that are being used.
Okay. And Rudolph is asking, do you use SharePoint as the engine for the full MAM project, or do you integrate other MAM software to meet customer requirements?
I really think that the biggest strengths of SharePoint is as a portal. I would always consider to have what Microsoft calls line of business solutions as separate solutions connected to it. You know, and as a portal, Microsoft has something called business connectivity services, and that's what you use then to make the assets appear in searches or on web pages in the portal. So I really think the kind of integration that SharePoint offers make it really a portal rather than a DAM system.
Okay. Bruno is making a comment and a question. The comment is that many DAM solutions lack a good business process management layer. And he's wondering, how do you see this evolving in the DAM space?
What layer? A business process management layer?
Yeah, right.
To be honest, I've heard that acronym once before, but I wonder if it's substantially different about business processes than it is about workflows. So run that question by me one more time.
I'm getting actually from the same thing from it that you. I think it's maybe meaning more in line with policy adherence. So having business process management. Maybe Bruno, if you've got if you could add into the chat box more specifics about that, we can come back to that question. Then we're going to go, Scott is asking, do you think support for embedded XMP should be a requirement in a DAM system?
That all the metadata is included in the asset in XMP?
I don't know if he's saying that. I think he's saying, do you think support for embedded metadata, so or embedded XMP? So maybe he's saying that as an option, should that be?
Okay, well, definitely. I mean, and this opens or is a subject by itself in terms of the various kinds of metadata there are. Quite obviously, you want to have certain metadata that you as the producer only want to have for yourself, and that should not go into the asset that you then sell to a client. So there's these different layers of metadata that exist, and of course, there's some, I'm not sure how many are left that are used out there. There's some file formats that have very limited ability to put metadata in there. But in general, of course, one should always use file formats that allow for standard metadata to be embedded.
Okay. And we have a clarification from Bruno that we were, in fact, correct in his assumption that we were, he's speaking in terms of things like compliancy, legal, and that sort of thing. Do you think that DAMs need to become more aware of these business policies as opposed to workflow-centric automation?
Yeah, well, you see, this is one other flavor of what I tried to get across earlier, that, you know, the big guys like Microsoft do very successfully to really separate themselves out, to not even have a competition from them vendors, and take Word documents, which are, you know, there's features in SharePoint now about locking down not just a document, but a whole site if there's a litigation being announced or pending. And not only they have this functionality, but they even come up and work with governments to lobby them into certain restrictions on, you know, how this needs to be made available to litigators and stuff like that. And these are topics that the DAM vendors haven't tackled at all. And of course, Microsoft, when you talk Office documents, they have an unfair advantage on top of it because nobody can manage the Office documents better than Microsoft, which produces the standards for these documents. So I really think that the DAM people, the DAM vendors should have worked together to create their own standards that also clearly define what should or should be the best practice.
Okay. And Paolo is asking, this is a great question. He says, why do you think Microsoft has not bought a DAM vendor? They seem to have bought everything else.
Didn't they buy Bulldog?
I don't know. Did they buy Bulldog?
I think somebody bought Bulldog, and it might have been Microsoft. But I think Microsoft suffers, is one of the top companies to suffer from the NIH, not invented here syndrome. So especially when it comes to doing just image management, for instance, I think they will just, you know, think we can do this ourselves.
Okay. All right. So we have a comment on that. Microsoft does not buy a DAM vendor because then they'd be Adobe. So, and then we have somebody else clarifying that Documentum bought Bulldog. So,
okay.
So maybe we've alerted somebody at Microsoft, hey, you know what? We need to go shopping for a DAM vendor. So, okay. So Carol. Carol says, I think the DAM industry got stupid because you left. Does this webinar mean you're returning? So Carol wants to meet. I take
that as a huge compliment, and you made my day.
So she wants to know if this webinar is an announcement from you that you're returning to the industry. And now we're getting comments here, lots of positive comments to that idea in the question box. Do you have anything to announce that you're coming back into the digital asset management space?
Well, I practically have. It's in a different form now. You know, as you mentioned initially, I'm on the advisory board of Axel, and I might take a couple of more positions. I've just been asked yesterday by a vendor, but that's not the DAM industry either, but has somewhat overlap with the DAM industry. It's about book publishing and learning. So I will certainly, probably that way, then if I have more clients in America, be more visible again. Will I join another DAM vendor? I don't have any current plans. I really enjoy actually being an advisory board member for companies, because it's actually a nice mix, because I don't have all the legal responsibility, but at the same time I can provide all my knowledge that I have, and it works very well both ways. The people that I'm working with and I enjoy it too.
Okay, that's fair. And we've got from Jerry is asking, now that you are no longer selling commercial DAM, would you or do you ever recommend open source DAM?
I have to say something very clearly. When the open source movement started, I was not fully convinced about it. By now, especially, we also slightly talked about JavaScript now having a more prominent role in the whole software development side. I see huge value in the open source projects, and I've been catching up on those. As I said, I've been going back to development and technology quite hands-on, and I'm really thrilled. There's a lot of good stuff out there with open source, and I would absolutely any day consider an open source solution against a proprietary solution, and probably even more, considering even all kinds of NSA scandals and whatever happened, because then I can see the source code.
Right. Okay. That's fair. And then we've got, in closing, I just want to read a few comments that have come in, and I think you'll know these people. Linda from Down Under. You remember Linda? I first met Jennifer when digital asset management was unheard of in Australia, and I was fresh from a career in librarianship. Jennifer, you helped me understand the principles and the products, and you shared your knowledge with our partners and customers throughout the Asia-Pacific region. We are indebted. We also have a comment.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Yeah, we have a comment from some guy named Hector, who says, Jennifer, your passion for the DAM industry has been an inspiration. I've learned to love DAM because of you. And
that is very kind. Thank you.
And then we have another one from Fong, who says, Jennifer played a vital role in MAM DAM for the Walt Disney Company. She operates with the utmost integrity and is one of the few people I would trust with any project, any job. I was overwhelmed with gratitude every day I partnered with someone who recognized my strengths and inspired me to be better. Thanks, Jennifer, for being such an amazing woman.
Well, that's a huge compliment. Thank you very much, Fong, and I look forward to seeing you again someday in Los Angeles.
Okay. So then we're going to wrap it up here. Just a note of thanks from me to Jennifer. As I mentioned, Jennifer is the reason that I got into digital asset management. I think I'm supposed to thank you for that. I'm not sure whether had I gone some other route that I might still have my career as a leading actor ahead of me. I don't know, maybe not. But I really do appreciate all of the opportunities that you gave me, and most of all, more than anything else, that you described digital asset management to me in a way that made the potential clear. You inspired me from that, and you made me always think about not what we have, but what we could have. And that has driven me through this industry from then all the way till now. So I absolutely appreciate that. Thank you so much for your contribution personally for me, and for your contribution to the industry on behalf of all of us who are in the industry and all of us who are using digital asset management worldwide. Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, thank you, and you know that I couldn't have done what I've done without you and all the other great people around me.
Well, we appreciate it. All right, and thanks to everybody else who has joined us here for this webinar. And we hope to.
Can I say one more thing, David?
Absolutely, you can.
So if I didn't entirely answer one of the questions, or if you have a question and didn't feel like you could get through with it, David can provide my contact information, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that are left open.
Right, and there is, we actually have the URL for Jennifer's LinkedIn profile is on this last Q&A page, and you can also reach her via finalcandidate.com, her website. And we're getting lots of thank you, Jennifer, coming in here, rapid firing into the questions box. You've got a lot of fans, a lot of people who appreciate your contributions.
Thank you very much. I feel honored.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the next Picturepark webinar.